I wasn't planning on making this documentary. In fact, when we brought home an 11-week-old Maltese puppy, I thought the biggest challenge would be potty training. I thought we'd lose a little sleep, buy too many toys, laugh a lot, and probably take too many pictures. I certainly wasn't expecting him to change the direction of this YouTube channel, but that's exactly what has happened. His name is Bel-Air, and before you click away because you're wondering why a health channel is suddenly talking about a puppy, stay with me. Because this isn't really a story about a puppy. Well, at least it didn't stay that way. The first morning Bel-Air was home, I opened the back door and obviously I had to carry him down the steps because he can't handle the stairs. But he took a couple steps into the yard and stopped. And it wasn't because he was afraid. He seemed fascinated. Like a single leaf kind of rolled across the grass and he got it. And, he stared around and his little head tilted sideways like they do. That's so cute. He's got one little pointy ear and one floppy. But he jumped back and pounced on it like he discovered the greatest treasure on earth, just in a leaf. And a few seconds later, the wind carried that leaf off and off he went to try and find a flower. He really likes the front garden with the flowers and the herbs. And he's just super curious. It's so cute. As I stood there in the morning and watching this tiny little puppy just investigate the backyard or the front yard that I've seen 1,000 times, I just smiled because, well, it's not because he was doing anything remarkable. It's because he thought that everything was remarkable. That moment should have only lasted a couple seconds, but I stood there for a few minutes just watching. And then a thought, it crossed my mind that honestly surprised me a little bit. When was the last time that I looked at anything with so much excitement and curiosity? Like a sunset or a flower or even my own yard. And when was the last time I felt completely captivated by something so ordinary? I wish I could tell you the answer came quickly because it didn't. Instead, that one little question followed me around for days because the more I watched Bel-Air, the more I realized something. He wasn't living in tomorrow and he wasn't thinking about yesterday. He wasn't missing the pet store. He wasn't worried about being productive or trying to optimize his life. He was just trying to become a better puppy. He was simply experiencing the day he had been given. And that sounds almost too simple, but standing there, I realized I may have quietly, accidentally forgotten to do that. Maybe you know the feeling, like you wake up already thinking about everything you have to accomplish, like the emails, appointments, the bills, the chores, the dishes, the laundry, the responsibilities. And the phone starts buzzing before your feet even hit the floor, somewhere between raising children and working and trying to stay healthy and trying to be responsible and trying to keep everyone else afloat. Life can become something that we just manage instead of something that we experience. And I don't think that happens overnight. I think it happens so gradually that we don't even notice it. I know I didn't. For almost 20 years, I've been trying to understand health, and I've spent thousands of hours reading, research, and listening to experts and learning about nutrition, inflammation, the immune system, and sleep, and stress, movement. And eventually, most recently, I've gotten really fascinated with fasting. And those years became what many of you might have witnessed is me exploring multiple sclerosis and then starting the fasting project. And I've loved the journey. So I'm inviting you on it with me because this journey really has been mind opening and I've learned so much. We're going to do this together because we need to really dive into fasting and explore the idea because I believe fasting is one of the most fascinating windows into how the human body was designed. But something has happened while I was studying all of those different things. Without realizing it, I slowly turned health into a project, like something to solve or optimize, something to improve. And there's nothing wrong with learning, there's nothing wrong with pursuing better health. But somewhere along the journey, I just got so focused on trying to understand life that I wasn't always fully experiencing it. And then God sent a puppy into my hands to chase a leaf in the backyard. And I know how ridiculous that sounds. Believe me, I do. He was a gift, an anniversary gift from my husband. And I also feel he's a little gift from God. If someone had told me a month earlier, Rebecca, one day you're going to learn one of the biggest lessons of your adult life from a little 2-pound Maltese, I would have laughed. Probably exactly the way you're laughing now, because how silly is that? But isn't that just like God? So often we pray for wisdom, expecting Him to answer through something really dramatic, like a life changing sermon or a groundbreaking research paper or a profound conversation, maybe. And sometimes He does, but other times He answers through things so ordinary that we almost miss them. I almost missed this one. Almost. Because as I stood there watching Bel-Air discover the world, I had absolutely no idea that this little member of our family, while teaching me, was about to join hands with another member that was going to teach me an even bigger lesson. And unlike Bel-Air, who's 2.2 pounds, she weighs well over 100 pounds. Not really, she's 103. But her name is Roxie, and she is our sweet Great Dane, and I adore her. Now, when we brought in this little guy, she honestly, she was a little bit nervous, right? Yeah, she really was. But we have had her, she's a Harley Quinn Great Dane, and we've had her for 6 years. She's about to have her birthday on July 8th. And one of, you know, let's consider it from the perspective of such a big dog who's been part of the family. And when this little guy showed up, she was scared. She didn't even want to get near him. She, I think, was just a little bit terrified, is how it seemed. Right. Roxie, if you've never met a Great Dane before, they're hard to describe until you stand next to one. They're enormous. And people stop and stare, like when she walks by, and children ask to pet her, a little bit nervous because they tend to say that's more like a horse. But she's gentle and she's patient. She's so loyal. She's, like I said, been a part of our family for 6 years. And she does love everybody, but she's also very nervous. Like she's scared of everything. She's scared of butterflies. She's scared really of anything that's new or uncertain to her. And she's always asking, am I safe? Now, I think something I realized watching Roxie was she wasn't rejecting Bel-Air. She was protecting herself from something she didn't yet understand. Now, that's very different. It isn't that she was so scared of him, but maybe she was. And isn't that true for many of us? Like sometimes we may feel rejected, we may feel fear, we may feel anger, and it might really be pain. We may be pushing away when we should be drawing closer to people. Like we have these different scenarios, these different feelings that bring the question, am I safe? And that question that was triggered in my mind by Roxie and Bel-Air, I ask myself, am I safe? Do I ever feel like this? Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that our bodies ask that question constantly, not just emotionally, biologically. Every moment of every day, your nervous system is quietly scanning your environment, without asking permission, without waiting for your conscious thoughts. It keeps asking a simple question: am I safe? Or do I need to protect myself? If you've ever slammed on your brakes before you consciously realized that there was danger, you've experienced this. Or if you've jumped when someone unexpectedly touched your shoulder, you've experienced this. It's your body always paying attention. And the remarkable thing is, it isn't only paying attention to physical danger, it's paying attention to your emotional safety, relational safety, environmental safety, predictability, and connection or trust. Now, long before I ever studied health, I realized that God designed our bodies with an incredible ability to protect us. And that's not a flaw, it's a gift. The challenge is that sometimes the alarm just keeps ringing long after the danger has passed. And when that happens, the body begins living as though ordinary life is an emergency. Now, that thought, it really changed the direction of my research when I was trying to figure out my health. I stopped asking, can dogs improve health? Instead, I began asking something much more interesting. What helps the human body remember that it is safe? Because maybe that question has something far more to do with than just a puppy. Maybe it has something to do with marriages and families and friendships and church communities, meals shared around a table, a walk through the neighborhood, these moments that remind us that we're safe, like a quiet morning before the rest of the house wakes up. Maybe healing doesn't begin with fixing everything that's wrong. Maybe healing begins the moment the body whispers that it's okay. You can breathe now. That thought, it led me into one of the most fascinating areas of research that I've explored in years. And what I discovered surprised me far more than I expected. It's one of the things I love most about science is that good science is humble. It doesn't begin by saying, I already know the answer. It begins by asking, what is actually true? And I think that's a beautiful way to approach life. Because for years, I thought my research was primarily just about food. Like I wanted to understand inflammation and the immune system and blood sugar and hormones, the gut microbiome, and eventually fasting. And those things do matter. They definitely still matter. In fact, I think they matter enormously. They're super important. But as I started reading research on stress and loneliness and connection and the nervous system, I realized that I had been looking through too narrow of a window. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't seeing the whole picture. And one study would lead to another, one book to another, and then another. And researchers were asking fascinating questions like what happens when people experience chronic loneliness? Or how long does stress long term affect the body? And why do healthy relationships seem to matter so much? And why do people who feel connected often experience like better overall health, than those who are isolated? And I started reading about human animal relationships, not social media opinions, not marketing, but actual research. And something surprised me. Scientists weren't claiming that dogs magically cure disease. That'd be silly. That's, important to recognize because they don't. A dog is not a replacement for a physician, and it's not a replacement for wise medical care. A dog isn't replacement for healthy nutrition, movement, sleep, or building your faith. But study after study, it has suggested that something much more interesting is going on. When people experience safe, positive companionship, their bodies often respond. And researchers have explored changes in stress hormones with this response change, like heart rate, blood pressure, feelings of loneliness, or emotional well being. The exact mechanisms are still being studied. There's still so much we don't know, but one conclusion kept appearing: connection matters. And that shouldn't surprise us. Long before scientists ever published research papers, God declared something in the Garden of Eden. It is not good that the man should be alone. I've thought about that verse many times. God didn't say, it is inconvenient. He didn't say, it would be nice if he had some company. He said, "It is not good." Think about that. Before there was disease, before there was death, before there was pain, God identified isolation as something that was not good. Human beings were created for relationship, like relationship with God and relationship with one another, relationship with creation. And maybe that's why loneliness hurts so deeply. It isn't just an emotion, it's the feeling that something we were designed for is missing. And as I reflected on all of this, I started seeing Bel-Air a little differently. Every morning he wakes up with exactly the same mission: find the people. He doesn't care whether someone is rich, successful, or productive, having a bad day, or still wearing their PJs. He simply wants to be with us. He'll trot from space to space, just trying to get close to someone until he'll curl up beside them or bring a toy or stare at them with those little dark eyes until they finally laugh and just have to pick him up. And almost every single time we do, it's amazing how quickly this little tiny puppy can change the atmosphere of an entire room. And it's not because he says anything profound, he can't even talk. It's because he invites connection. But I started wondering, how many opportunities for connection do I walk past every day? How many times is one of my children trying to tell me about their day while my mind is somewhere else? And how many times has my husband started a conversation while I'm already thinking about tomorrow's schedule? Like, how many sunsets have I missed because I was just looking at a screen instead of looking up? And when I drive with my kids in the car or when we're on a road trip and I see all these beautiful things and I look back to see if they're capturing it, and they're looking at their phone, it's in hand, and they miss it. And it's just sad because the time I say, "Look, guys, look, we've passed it," because they're mentally somewhere else. Now, that realization, it's not fun. It can be uncomfortable because I love my family. I do deeply. But love isn't only measured by intention, it's also measured by attention. We give our attention to what we believe matters. And somewhere along the way, I think a lot of us have accidentally given our attention away to like endless notifications and breaking news or arguments we'll never remember or care about a few months from now. Like 6 or 7 months from now, we aren't even going to remember what we were irritated about this morning when we woke up. The pressure, though, is always there to produce more and to accomplish more and always hurry toward the next thing. Meanwhile, life keeps happening and children keep growing. Marriages are going to keep unfolding and parents keep getting older and seasons keep changing. The puppy, this little guy who can't climb the stairs, is eventually going to learn. And my Great Dane, who was afraid of him, slowly became curious because life never stops moving. The question is, are we moving with it? Are we racing past it so quickly that we don't even notice the miracles hidden inside our ordinary days? Now, that may sound like a strange question in a YouTube documentary about health, but I don't think it is a strange question anymore because I've become convinced that health is not simply about what happens inside of our cells. Health is also about the life those cells are helping us to live. Trillions and trillions of cells inside of our body. It's about whether we're becoming the kind of person who knows how to receive the gift of today, because honestly, no amount of physical health is going to replace a life that's never truly lived. And maybe, perhaps, that's one of the greatest lessons that this little guy has been trying to teach me since he came to our home, really just a few days ago. And the more I've thought about everything I've been learning, the more one word keeps returning to my mind: rhythm. Not rules, not perfection, but rhythm. So when I look at creation, I see rhythms everywhere. The sun rises and the sun sets, and the tide comes in and the tide goes out. The seasons change and seeds are planted and harvests come. Winter gives way to spring and spring gives way to summer. Creation doesn't rush and it doesn't panic and it doesn't compare itself to yesterday. It simply continues in the rhythm it was created to follow. And I started thinking about my own body and my heart and how it beats with rhythm, and my lungs breathe with rhythm, and I sleep in rhythm, and I wake in rhythm. Even my brain, it changes throughout the day according to the rhythms that God designed long before anyone understood the science behind them. Now, maybe that's why I've become so passionate about fasting. It's not because I believe fasting is some magical cure, and it's not because I think everyone should fast exactly the same way, but because fasting reminds me of something much bigger. It reminds me life was never meant to be a constant consumption. Like every healthy rhythm includes both receiving and releasing, breathing in and breathing out, working and resting, eating and not eating, speaking and listening, and learning and reflecting, and giving and receiving. And that's really how life works. And somewhere along the way, many of us lost that rhythm. We started believing that the more we do, the better off we are. More work, more entertainment, more food, more information, more commitment, more productivity, more hustle, more noise, like more, more, more. We became experts at filling just every empty space. If we have to wait in line, we reach for our phones. If we're sitting quietly, we reach for our phones. If we're uncomfortable, we distract ourselves. Silence, it really has become something we avoid. Stillness feels uncomfortable. And some of us, honestly, the most meaningful moments of my life have happened in stillness. And that's true for a lot of us. Some of my deepest prayers happened when I finally stopped talking. And some of my clearest thoughts came while walking quietly outside. And some of my greatest ideas came after I stopped trying hard to find them. So it's caused me to begin wondering if one of the greatest lessons in modern life isn't simply about improving our poor nutrition. Maybe it's the loss of margin, like margin to think, that space to pray, to notice. Margin is just this the margin and the space to simply exist without feeling guilty for not producing something. Bel-Air has margin. He has lots of space. He can spend 10 minutes investigating the same toy or the same yard. He'll chase one little bug as though nothing else in the world exists, and then he'll lie down in the grass and close his eyes and just let the breeze move through his fur. He isn't wasting time. He's living it. Watching him has made me realize something that was surprisingly difficult to admit. I had become very good, I felt or thought, at managing life, but not always very good at experiencing it. There's a difference. Managing asks, what's next? Experiencing asks, what's here? And we all have responsibilities. Let's be realistic. Bills need to be paid, and children need to be raised. Meals have to be cooked, and appointments need to be kept. Life requires stewardship, but stewardship is different than hurry. Jesus lived with purpose, but he never seemed rushed. I've thought about that often. He had the most important mission in the history of the world, yet he stopped for people. He noticed the blind man everyone else ignored. He listened to children. He shared meals. He attended weddings. He withdrew to quiet places to pray. And he walked. He noticed. He really was fully present wherever he was. So I've asked myself many times, if the Savior of the world was not constantly in a hurry, why am I? That question has stayed with me. Because if I'm moving so fast that I don't notice my children growing up, if I'm too distracted to really hear my husband, if I'm too busy to recognize the beauty God has surrounded me with, then what exactly am I racing toward? When I was watching Bel-Air a couple days ago, and he discovered rain for the first time, just a little sprinkle. And he stepped outside and looked up and seemed completely confused. Like a tiny little drop landed on his nose and he jumped backward and he ran toward it and then away from it. And he was kind of confused, but within seconds he had turned a rainy afternoon experience into an adventure. And I laughed at him, not because rain is funny, but because I couldn't remember the last time I had greeted something ordinary with that much excitement. Children do that, and puppies do that, and somewhere between childhood and adulthood, many of us quietly we lose that ability, and I think we stop expecting wonder. We become efficient, responsible, capable, but perhaps, maybe, a little less alive. And I'm not suggesting to become childish. I'm suggesting that we become childlike. Again, like curious, teachable, grateful, quick to laugh and quick to forgive and quick to notice beauty. Because I don't think wonder is something that we outgrow. I think it's something we forget. And perhaps one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is the opportunity to be able to remember. I've been thinking a lot about that word, remember. Remember. Not remembering facts, but remembering how to live. Because I don't think most of us have forgotten that sleep matters. We know it does. We haven't forgotten that real food is better than highly processed foods. Be honest. Most of us already know that. We haven't forgotten that movement is good for us, or that relationships matter, or that prayer changes us. Because deep down, I think we already know those things. The challenge is that knowing something and building a life around that something are two very different things. Somewhere along the way, our attention can become fragmented. We became experts at reacting instead of intentionally living. And I catch myself doing that all the time. I'll sit down to answer a text or uh, an email or get something done, just something that needs to be taken care of, get the electric bill paid, get the dishes done, or whatever. And 20 minutes later, I can be online trying to be productive and somehow I've wandered onto three different sites and checked the weather twice because it might have changed from no, it's not going to change, but yet I do it. I check it twice and then I got to respond again to that message and then completely forgotten what I originally sat down to do when I intended to get to the kitchen dishes anyways. Maybe you've done that too. I'm sure you have. Our attention is just constantly being invited somewhere else. And whatever repeatedly captures our attention eventually begins shaping our lives. If our attention is constantly captured by fear, fear slowly becomes familiar. And if it's constantly captured by courage, we begin maybe expecting courage. But if it's constantly captured by outrage, then we're going to just live in a constant preparatory state for conflict is coming. But again, if it's captured by gratitude, something beautiful begins happening. Gratitude doesn't erase pain, but it can change the way that we walk through it. Like one morning, and I was sitting outside before the rest of the house had woken up and watered the garden, and it was quiet, really quiet. That kind of quiet that almost feels unfamiliar. Bel-Air had come out. He wasn't running and he wasn't playing. He was just sitting there, looking around, listening to the birds. And I don't really know what he was looking at. Maybe it was a bird or maybe he had spotted a bug or something. Maybe nothing at all. But I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I stopped. No phone, no notebook, no list, no podcast playing in the background. Just me, a puppy, and a sunrise. And I slipped off my shoes and I stood there and I just grounded myself. And it only lasted a few minutes, but something inside me settled. Nothing about my circumstances had changed. I still had the same responsibilities waiting for me. The dishes were still in the sink. The laundry still needed folded. Texts still needed to be answered. There were still people depending on me. And my diagnosis had not disappeared. Life was still life. But for those few moments, I remembered something, that peace, it isn't always found when our circumstances change. Sometimes it's found when our attention changes. And that realization has challenged me because I had spent years asking, how do I improve my health? And I suddenly found myself asking, what has my attention been feeding? And those are two different questions. Like our bodies consume food, but our minds consume stories, images, conversations, news, entertainment, or worry or hope. Everything we repeatedly take in becomes part of the environment that we're living in. And it's one of the reasons fasting has become so meaningful to me. It's not because it taught me to eat less, it's because it taught me to become aware, more aware of the habits I didn't know that I already had, and aware of some impulses I usually ignored, or aware of how quickly that I was just reaching for comfort instead of stillness every time I felt something not good. And I realized, what if we practice that same awareness in every part of life? What if we noticed when hurry was just stealing our peace? And what if we noticed if fear was shaping our decisions, or noticed when our children were asking for an attention instead of another toy? And what if we noticed when our spouse didn't need advice? They just needed us to listen. What if we noticed that the answer to some of our deepest longings isn't found in adding more, but in becoming fully present with what we've already been given? I don't think Bel-Air changed my life because he's extraordinary. He's a Maltese puppy. Hundreds of these guys are sold every single day. I think he changed my life because he slowed me down long enough to notice what was already there, the laughter that had been waiting in our living room, and the beauty that had been waiting in our backyard, and the conversations that had been waiting around the dinner table, and the peace that had been waiting in the quiet. And perhaps the God who had been patiently waiting for me to stop hurrying long enough to realize that he had never left. The older I get, the more I believe that God's greatest invitations are rarely shouted. They're whispered. A sunrise, or a child's laugh, or a shared meal, a walk after dinner, or a Sabbath afternoon spent with friends, a husband reaching for your hand, or a Great Dane slowing down, learning to trust, and a tiny white Maltese who reminds an entire family that today is worth celebrating. These moments don't look extraordinary when they're happening, but one day when you look back over your life, you may realize they were the moments that shaped you most, not because they demanded your attention, but because they just quietly deserved it. As this documentary began taking shape, I realized something that surprised me. I thought I was going to make a YouTube film today about health, but somewhere along the way, it became a film about home. Not the building, not the walls, not the address or the atmosphere or the teenagers hopping in the background. You might be able to hear my daughter in her room. She's playing Roblox, I think. Because It's it's not that. It's just the atmosphere. Because every home has an atmosphere. You can feel it the moment you walk through the door. There are homes where you immediately feel yourself relax and you breathe a little deeper, and people smile when they see each other, and conversations just happen naturally, and you feel welcome. And then there's also homes where something just feels different. Like everyone is busy and everyone's distracted and everyone's carrying something just so heavy, and no one is necessarily doing anything wrong. Life has just become really loud, fast, demanding. And I've asked myself, what kind of atmosphere am I helping create? Not just on my best days, but on ordinary days. Like on the days when I'm tired and on the days when my body doesn't feel the way I'd like it to. And on the days when dinner is late or the laundry isn't finished and the kitchen is messy. What kind of home am I building then? Because I don't believe healing happens only inside hospitals or clinics or research laboratories. Those places matter. They matter tremendously. But healing also happens around kitchen tables and on front porches and during family prayers, while taking an evening walk, or when someone finally feels safe enough to tell the truth, when forgiveness replaces resentment, or when laughter fills a room that has been quiet for too long. Healing just has a way of showing up in ordinary places. And I think that's because ordinary life is where we actually live. It's easy to imagine that transformation happens in just one unforgettable moment. Sometimes it does. But more often, transformation happens quietly, one conversation at a time, or one meal at a time, and one apology at a time, or one bedtime story, one family dinner, one cute puppy. One sunset, one faithful day, repeated hundreds of times. That's how homes are built, and that's how marriages are built, and that's how trust is built. That's how children grow. And I think that's often how health grows too. It's not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through an environment that gently supports it. So I've started thinking about home differently, not as a place where I simply live, but as an ecosystem. Every habit affects something else. The way we speak to one another affects the atmosphere. The atmosphere affects stress. Stress affects sleep. Sleep affects patience, and patience affects relationships, and relationships affect joy. And joy affects how we experience the day we've been given. Everything is connected, just like the body. For years, I've taught that the body isn't a collection of separate systems. Like the immune system doesn't work alone, and neither does the brain or the digestive system or the hormones. Everything communicates, everything influences everything else. And now I find myself realizing that families work much the same way. One person's peace often becomes another person's peace. One person's anxiety can quickly become everyone's anxiety. One person's encouragement can lift an entire room, and one person's gratitude can change the direction of a conversation, or just one person's kindness in the home can interrupt an entire day of frustration. And that's humbling because it means every one of us has influence, more influence than we probably realize. Bel-Air certainly doesn't realize it. He has no idea that simply walking into the room changes the mood and makes people smile. He isn't trying to teach anyone. He isn't trying to inspire anybody. He's just delighted to be alive. And somehow that change in the environment, it's just contagious. The delight he has for life is contagious. And I've wondered if that's part of what Jesus meant when he told us to become like little children. Children haven't learned to hide their joy yet, and they haven't learned to believe that wonder is immature. No, they're curious, they're quick to laugh and quick to forgive and quick to trust. They notice things that adults rush past every day. Maybe maturity was never supposed to cost us our sense of wonder. Maybe wisdom and wonder were always meant to kind of grow together. And as I've watched Bel-Air over the last few days, I've realized neither one of Bel-Air or Roxie is in a hurry. They, well, Bel-Air just doesn't wake up frustrated because Roxie didn't become his best friend yesterday. He simply greets her again today. And Roxie doesn't force herself to trust before she's ready. She simply takes one small step at a time until she feels ready. And there's grace in that. Progress without pressure, growth without forcing, patience without giving up. And isn't that how God so often works with us? He doesn't demand instant maturity. He invites faithful growth day after day and season after season, one lesson at a time. And looking back over the last 20 years, I can see that now. God, He rarely changed me overnight. He he changed me gradually. One question, one conversation, one hardship, one answered prayer, one unexpected blessing, one ordinary day at a time. And somewhere in the middle of all those ordinary days, he quietly has been teaching me that healing is rarely about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully the person he created me to be. It's about becoming more fully the person he created you to be. I think that's what I've been searching for all these years. Not just relief from symptoms, not just another piece of health information, and not even another breakthrough. I've been searching for what it means to become fully alive. When I first was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I thought the question was, how do I stop losing my health? Today, I think the better question is, how do I faithfully steward the life God has already given me? Those are different questions. One is driven primarily by fear, and the other is driven by purpose. Fear asks, what if everything falls apart? And purpose asks, what can I faithfully do today? Fear imagines a future that hasn't happened yet. Purpose, though, embraces the day that's already been given. And that doesn't mean that we ignore tomorrow. We still need to save and we need to plan and prepare, and those things are wise. But we don't sacrifice today's life trying to control tomorrow's uncertainty. I've learned that lesson slowly. I'm going to be 40 soon, and it's taken me a long minute, couple of decades. I'm still learning, and there are still days when my mind wants to race ahead. And there's still days that I worry about my health and my children and about this channel. I feel like it's never going to take off. I had a goal and I'm working towards it, but I still haven't gone viral. I still haven't gotten a million views, and maybe I will. I don't know, but I worry about the channel and whether I'm doing enough and whether I'm leading my family in the best way I can. Those thoughts still come. The difference is they don't get to stay as long as they used to, because over the years, God has gently taught me to come back to today, back to gratitude, back to faithfulness, just back to the next right step. And I've come to believe that most beautiful lives are not built through extraordinary discipline. They're built through ordinary faithfulness, making breakfast, reading scripture, going for the walk, calling your parents, listening to your spouse, playing with your kids, laughing with your friends, just taking care of the body you've been entrusted with, showing kindness to a stranger in the grocery store. None of those things will probably ever make you go viral. None of them will make the evening news. But I have a feeling that they'll matter far more at the end of our lives than many of the things we spend so much time chasing. Sometimes I wonder what life would look like if we measured success differently. Instead of asking, how much did I accomplish today? What if I asked, how well did I love today? How well did I listen? How well did I encourage someone? And how well did I care for the body that God gave me? How well did I notice his goodness? How well did I receive the gift of this ordinary day right here? I don't ask those questions because I always get them right. No, I ask them because I need them. They remind me what actually matters. Bel-Air has no idea how many times he's interrupted something that I'm working on. I could be sitting at my desk or my phone or whatever, reading a book, focused on writing, researching, editing, and suddenly he needs attention. Imagine that. He'll look up as if to say, "Come play." And sometimes he just has to get a smile and sit down for a minute. And other times, I put everything down. And for a few minutes, every single time I do, I just feel better. Like I have a clearer mind, a lighter heart, and a deeper appreciation for the life that I'm trying to build. And that may not sound profound, but I think it is because perhaps productivity was never supposed to replace humanity. Perhaps efficiency wasn't meant to replace relationships, and maybe success was never supposed to cost us joy. One of the greatest lies our culture quietly whispers is that, li- bless you, life begins when we finally arrive. Why? Why does our culture say that? When we finally have enough money or enough followers or enough recognition, security, when we finally answer the right questions or have good enough health or more time. But what if life has been happening all along the time we've been looking for enough of these things? What if the moments we're rushing past are the very moments we'll someday wish we could experience one more time? One more family dinner, one more bedtime story, one more walk around the neighborhood with a puppy that we love, or one more conversation with someone we cherish, one more sunrise, one more ordinary morning with a delicious smoothie in our hand. And a little white puppy who somehow believes every new day is the greatest adventure he's ever gonna know. I don't want to miss those moments because I'm becoming convinced that those moments are not interruptions to life. They are life. And maybe that's what health has been pointing us toward all along. Not simply adding years to our life, but adding life to our years. Not just helping us live longer, but helping us live deeper, helping us become more present, more grateful, more compassionate, more faithful, and more fully alive. If this journey has taught me anything, it's that healing isn't always the restoration of what was lost. Sometimes healing is the discovery of something even more beautiful than we knew to look for. And I think that's exactly where this story has been leading us from the very beginning. Do you remember how this documentary began? I asked you a question. Have you ever prayed for something and then completely missed the answer? Because it didn't look the way you expected? I've thought about that question every day since Bel-Air came home. Because if I'm honest, I don't remember ever praying, "Lord, please send me a Maltese puppy." I don't think I did. That wasn't my prayer. My prayer was much deeper than that. For years, my prayer has sounded more like this: "Please help me understand. Help me understand healing. Help me understand how to help other people. Help me understand why so many people are suffering. Help me understand what you've been trying to teach me through all of this." I kept expecting the answer to arrive through another study or another expert or another conference or another book. And those things, they have been gifts, real gifts, and I've learned so much from them. But I wonder how often we expect God to answer extraordinary prayers only through extraordinary experiences. What if He often answers them through ordinary life, like a conversation you almost didn't have, a neighbor you barely knew, like and end up marrying. My husband was my neighbor. He moved in across the street. A child who asks an unexpected question, or a walk you almost skipped that ended up being very meaningful, or a sunrise you almost slept through. A puppy who wandered into your home, just like this little guy. And quietly, these things are just reminding you to see. And maybe that's why Jesus spent so much time teaching with ordinary things like seeds and birds and bread and sheep and fishing nets, vineyards and children and meals, water. He taught a lot through water. He was constantly saying, look, pay attention. The lessons you're searching for are already all around you. And I think somewhere along the way, I stopped looking, not intentionally, just life became busy. And my diagnosis became the lens which I viewed everything through. And health became the project, research became the mission. Productivity quietly became the measure of a good day. And without realizing it, I slowly stopped seeing the miracles hidden inside of ordinary life. Bel-Air helped me see this again. And it's not because he's extraordinary. It's because he responds to ordinary things just with extraordinary delight. Like I said, a leaf or rain or the sound of the kids laughing or the front door opening. He gets so excited when my husband comes in. He's supposed to be my puppy, but I think just adores my husband. It's his best friend. He loves a familiar face, even though he's still brand new. He celebrates things that I had quietly begun overlooking. And watching him, I've found myself just asking another question. What if gratitude isn't something we feel? What if gratitude is something we practice? Because feelings come and go. Some mornings we wake up full of energy, other mornings we don't, and some days we feel effortless, and other days, it might feel really, really difficult. And gratitude, gratitude is a decision to notice. It's a decision to remember and a decision to receive today's gifts, even while praying for tomorrow's miracles. That has changed me. Not overnight and not dramatically, but quietly and faithfully day to day. I still pray for healing and wisdom and strength, and I still pray that someday we'll better understand diseases like multiple sclerosis. I still pray for families walking through impossible circumstances, and none of that has changed. But now I pray something else too. It's, Lord, don't let me miss today while I'm waiting for tomorrow. Because tomorrow isn't promised, today is. This breath, this conversation, this family dinner, this opportunity, this chance to love. These are the moments that become a life. And I've realized something over the past 20 years that most people, they don't lose their lives all at once. They lose them one distracted day at a time, one hurried conversation and one postponed sunset, one more evening spent somewhere else mentally while life quietly unfolds in front of them. And I don't want that. I don't want to spend my life preparing to live. I want to live fully, gratefully, faithfully. And I'm sure you do too. Now, that doesn't mean every day will feel exciting. Most won't. Most days will probably look remarkably ordinary. Breakfast, laundry, work, school, walking the dog, making dinner, reading before bed, praying, sleeping, then waking up and doing it again. But perhaps that's just exactly where the beauty has been hiding all along. Not in escaping ordinary life, but in learning how to see it. Because when you begin seeing ordinary life as a gift, everything changes. The sunrise and sunset isn't just another experience with the sun, it's another chance. It's another opportunity to gather. The walk isn't just exercise, it's time to breathe and to notice and to think and to pray. Even caring for a puppy becomes more than just another responsibility. It becomes a reminder that joy doesn't have to be earned, and wonder doesn't have to be manufactured, and hope doesn't have to wait until life becomes perfect. Hope is available. It's right here. It's right now. And if we slow down long enough to notice it, we can experience it. Sometimes I wonder what my 20-year-old self would think if she could see me now. Not because everything turned out the way I hoped, it didn't. It's not because every prayer has been answered, it hasn't. And it's not because multiple sclerosis disappeared, it didn't. But I think she'd be surprised for a completely different reason. I think she'd be surprised that after spending 20 years searching for health, I finally realized that I wasn't really searching for health at all. I was searching for life, real life, the kind of life that Jesus described when he said, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. I've thought about those words so many times. He didn't promise an easy life, and he didn't promise a life without sorrow. He didn't promise a life without illness. He promised life, abundant life. And I don't believe abundance is measured by how much we own or how many followers we have. Although I'd love to have more. Like and subscribe, guys. Join the group. He is not measuring how successful other people think we are. I think abundance is measured by how fully we receive the gifts that we've already been given. The gift of another sunrise, of another conversation, another chance to learn and to begin again. I used to believe that if I could just solve the puzzle of health, then I could start living finally. Now I think I had it backwards. Living well, it's part of becoming healthier, not because joy cures disease, but because laughter replaces medicine. And it's not because hope eliminates suffering. It's not. It's not because of these things, but because human beings, they were never designed to live as machines. We weren't. We were designed to love and to worship, to create, to serve and celebrate, to grieve and to belong and to rest and to wonder. And those aren't distractions from health. They're just part of it. That's why I no longer think of fasting as merely a nutrition strategy. To me, fasting has become a reminder that life is healthiest when it follows God's rhythms instead of my appetites. Sometimes that means saying yes. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means working hard. And sometimes it means resting completely. And sometimes it means speaking. Sometimes it means becoming quiet enough to listen. That's true in almost every part of life. Healthy marriages have rhythms, and healthy friendships have rhythms. Healthy families have rhythms, and healthy churches have rhythms. Healthy bodies have rhythms, and perhaps healthy souls do too. And when those rhythms begin working together, something beautiful starts to happen. Not perfection, peace, not control, but trust. Not constant striving, but faithful stewardship. As I've watched Bel-Air over these last few days, I've noticed something else. He has never once questioned whether he belongs. He simply assumes that he's part of this family. He doesn't earn his place every morning. He doesn't wonder whether he's loved enough today. He doesn't perform for acceptance. He simply receives it. And that has challenged me far more than I expected because I think many of us spend our lives trying to earn what God has already offered. We try to earn worth, earn approval, earn significance, earn enough success to finally believe that we matter. But maybe our greatest need isn't to achieve more. Maybe it's to receive more deeply, to receive grace, to receive love, to receive the gift of this day, to receive the people God has already placed all around us, just to receive the ordinary miracles we become too busy to notice. You know, if creating this documentary has taught me anything, it's that healing often begins the moment we stop treating life like a problem to solve and begin noticing it as a gift to steward, not perfectly, but faithfully, just one ordinary day at a time. And strangely enough, one of my greatest reminders of that truth still weighs less than this little 2 pounds. He still chases leaves. He still gets distracted by butterflies. He still thinks every member of our family exists primarily just to play with him. And every single day, he reminds me that delight is not a luxury. It's part of being fully alive. Maybe that's why I smile every time I watch him run across the yard, because I'm no longer just watching a puppy. I'm watching a reminder of who I want to become. Someone who notices, someone who slows down, someone who loves deeply, and someone who keeps learning, someone who never loses the ability to be amazed by ordinary things. And I don't know about you, but I think our world could use a little more of that. Now, as we've spent this time together, I hope you've noticed something. I haven't tried to convince you that a puppy is the answer, because he isn't. Bel-Air is not the answer. Fasting also isn't the answer. Nutrition isn't the answer. Supplements aren't the answer. Neither is the perfect exercise program or the perfect morning routine or the perfect amount of sleep. Those things matter. They do. Some of them matter tremendously, but they're not the foundation. The foundation is learning to live in harmony with the one who designed us. Everything else grows from there. The more I've studied the human body, the more I believe science and faith are asking many of us the same questions. How were we designed to function? What helps us flourish? What causes us to break down? What restores us? Science looks through a microscope. Faith looks through scripture. When both are pursued with humility, I believe they can help us to appreciate the incredible wisdom of our Creator even more deeply. That's why I don't see my health journey as a search for shortcuts anymore. I see it as a lifelong educational challenge, an invitation to keep learning, to keep observing, to keep asking better questions. If you guys have any, post them below. I'd love to interact with you. But to keep adjusting, to keep growing. And it's not because I'll ever become perfect, but because I want to become more faithful. I've stopped asking, what's the quickest way to fix myself? Now I ask, what's the next faithful step? Sometimes that step is making a smoothie for breakfast. Sometimes it's going to bed instead of watching another episode. I know it's hard. We only have so much free time, especially if you're working. You log in so many hours, and then when you get home, you want to have some time, and it's so easy to just stay awake. Sometimes it's calling a friend that you've been thinking about, and that's a good thing. Sometimes it's taking a walk after dinner. Sometimes it's making an appointment you've been avoiding, and sometimes it's asking for help. What's your next faithful step? Ask yourself. Be honest. Just think of it. Sometimes it's sitting quietly with God and admitting, I don't know what to do. That's why I'm watching these videos. And I've learned that faithfulness is almost always smaller than we imagine. We want giant leaps, and God often invites us to take the next step, just one, then another, then another. Looking back over my own life, that's exactly how every meaningful change has happened. Not in one dramatic moment, but through thousands of small decisions that slowly changed the direction of my life. No one applauds those moments, and no one makes headlines about them. No one posts them on social media. They're quiet, almost invisible. Honestly, I published my first book. I was so excited, and I still am. It's available. Finally Understand Multiple Sclerosis by Rebecca Gordon. You can get it on Amazon. And I posted it in April is when it published, and now we're in July. And I have had one sale, and it was my mom. Sometimes the story that we want for our life, it moves slower than we want. I think about farmers sometimes, and a farmer doesn't stand in the middle of the field yelling at the crops to grow. He prepares the soil, he plants the seed, waters faithfully, pulls weeds, and waits. He cannot force the harvest. Just like with my book, I planted, it's out there. I can't force you to buy it, but you should check it out. Link is below. And the farmer, he can faithfully cultivate the conditions where life is most likely to grow, just like I'm doing by telling you about my book. I think our lives work much the same way. We cannot control everything. We cannot guarantee outcomes. We cannot promise tomorrow, but we can prepare the soil. We can cultivate healthy rhythms and we can nourish our bodies, protect our relationships, and guard our attention. Practice gratitude and choose hope. Walk with God, and then we trust Him with the harvest. Now, that perspective has brought me more peace than almost anything else because it reminds me that I'm not responsible for controlling everything. I'm responsible for stewarding what I've been given today, today's attitudes, today's choices, today's relationships, and today's opportunities, today's ordinary miracles. When I watch Bel-Air, I don't just see a puppy. I see a daily invitation. An invitation to notice, to laugh, to breathe, to slow down, and to remember, to live this day before reaching for the next one. And every once in a while, I look over and see Roxie lying a little closer than she was the day before. Sometimes Bel-Air doesn't even notice. He's too busy playing with another toy. But I notice because healing often looks exactly like that. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's just one small step closer, one more moment of trust, one more ordinary day. And before long, you're going to realize you're living in a place you once thought you'd never reach. Not because one miracle changed everything all at once, but it's because thousands of faithful moments quietly did. When I first imagined making this documentary episode, I thought it was going to end with answers. And instead, it's ending with an invitation. An invitation I'm still learning to accept myself because if there's one thing these last 20 years have taught me, it's this. Life is not waiting for us somewhere in the future. It has been happening all along. Every ordinary moment, like every ordinary conversation, every ordinary meal, prayer, or walk, every little act of kindness, those weren't the moments between life. They were life. I spent years believing that if I could just solve the mystery of multiple sclerosis, I'd save my health. And then I could finally relax, finally enjoy life, and finally stop worrying. But healing doesn't usually happen that way. At least it hasn't for me. Healing has looked more like learning to trust God a little more this year than I did last year. Healing has looked like learning to forgive a little faster and be a more grateful, just a little bit more patient and more present. Healing has looked like discovering that my body is not my enemy. It has been trying actively to protect me all along. Healing has looked like realizing that fear makes a terrible architect for a life. Faith builds much better homes. When I look at Roxie now, my big Great Dane who was so nervous, I don't see the dog who ran away from a tiny puppy. I see courage, quiet courage, the courage to take one step closer, then another, then another. She didn't wake up one morning completely different. She changed through hundreds of tiny moments. One sniff, one glance, one shared room, one peaceful afternoon, one ordinary moment after another. Isn't that how trust always goes? Isn't that how marriages become stronger? Isn't that how friendships deepen and grow? Isn't that how children become confident? Isn't that how disciples are made? It's not all at once. It's one faithful moment at a time. Bel-Air never tried to convince Roxy to trust him. He never demanded it. He never forced it. He simply just kept showing up, the same joyful puppy, every single day. And there's something profound about that. It's beautiful because love, it doesn't usually force. Love faithfully remains. And as I watch these two, I realize something that has become deeply personal. Maybe God has been just as patient with me. Maybe all these years while I was trying to figure everything out, he wasn't disappointed that I still had questions. He simply kept inviting me closer, closer to him, closer to family, closer to the life he had already given me, closer to peace and trust, closer to wonder, closer to the rhythms that he established long before I was born. And maybe he's extending the same invitation to you. It's not an invitation to become someone else, it's an invitation to become more fully yourself. The person he imagined when he created you, the person he knows how to receive today's gifts without constantly worrying about tomorrow's uncertainties. The person he knows who can work hard and still rest deeply. The person who can pursue health without becoming consumed by it, who can walk through suffering without surrendering hope, the person who can laugh again, notice again, trust again, live again. If you've watched this far, I want to thank you, not just for watching a documentary, but for sharing this journey with me. Some of you have been with me since the beginning of this channel, and you've watched me talk about multiple sclerosis, nutrition, food, supplements, lifestyle, fasting, and you've encouraged me, prayed for me, and shared your own stories with me. Not necessarily on here. I'd love to get comments, comment below, but my friends have talked to me and shared with me. And those stories matter. Your stories matter because this has never really been about building a YouTube channel. It's been about building a community of people who refuse to believe that a diagnosis gets the final word, a community of people who believe that our bodies are worth caring for because they are gifts from God, our creator, a community of people that are willing to keep learning, keep growing, keep asking honest questions, and keep encouraging one another, keep hoping. That's the community I'm building here and I want to be a part of, and I hope you do too. As for Bel-Air, I have a feeling you've only met the beginning of his story. He's still learning, still growing, still discovering the world, one little bit at a time, one muddy paw print at a time. And Roxie, who you just saw come behind me, is still learning too. Every day she comes a little closer. Every day she trusts him a little bit more. And if I'm honest, so am I. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still asking questions and still discovering that God is far kinder, far more patient, and far more interested in our flourishing than I understood when I was 20 years old, sitting in that neurologist's office. If I could go back, if I could sit beside that frightened young mother for just a few minutes, I know I would tell her, your life is not over. And I'm going to tell you the same thing. Your life is not over. Your story is not shrinking. God is not finished. There will be tears. There will definitely be hard days. There will be questions that take years to answer. But there will also be laughter you cannot imagine yet. Friendships you've never even encountered. Children who are going to make you proud. A faith that will become deeper than fear, and sunrises that will take your breath away. Ordinary mornings that will become holy. And one day, a tiny white Maltese puppy will wander into your home and remind you that some of God's greatest gifts arrive so quietly, you almost miss them. So wherever you are today, whether you're carrying a diagnosis, walking through grief, fighting anxiety or trying to rebuild your health, or just simply longing for a little more peace, don't overlook the ordinary gifts that are already in front of you. Eat nourishing food. Rest when your body needs to rest. Move with gratitude and fast with wisdom. Try to laugh often and forgive quickly. Look up and take the walk. Watch the sunrise. Hold the hand and read the scriptures. Pray honesty. Do it. Pray with honesty. Love your family deeply. Notice creation. Protect your attention. Don't wait for a perfect life before deciding to live, because one day I think we're all going to discover that the life we were waiting for was quietly unfolding around us the entire time. If no one has told you today, you really are worth it. You are worth it. I promise. Check out my website at URWorthItHealth.com. The letter U, the letter R, worthithealth.com. Take care of your body, the mind, the heart, and the relationships that God has entrusted to you. I'll see you in the next episode, my friend. And until then, keep taking the next faithful step. And don't forget to notice the little miracles. Sometimes they come with four little tiny paws.